video, seeing as we're getting a new Superman movie with a new version of Lex Luthor, I figure it's time to talk about the first live-action appearance of Lex Luthor from back in the day. So, alright, let's go!
Yeah. So, we start off in Metropolis, where there is a crime spree happening. Things are being stolen. Crooks are getting away scot-free. The police suspect that this is the work of the gang led by Lex Luthor, the renegade scientist, mainly because it is being led by Lex Luthor. But unfortunately, they cannot prove it. But Luthor being the bold guy that he is, he puts out a communique over the police radio bands with a demand that all of the money in the city trust fund be transferred over to him, Lex Luthor, or else he'll destroy the Metropolis River Bridge. And if he still doesn't get the money, he will level the entire city. Ha! You know, you were doing pretty good by laying low and getting away with this, Lex. Now you just completely blew it. This broadcast was overheard at the offices of the Daily Planet, with such fine employees listening in, like Perry White, Clark Kent, Lois Lane, and our good buddy, Jimmy Olsen. So as Lois and Jimmy drive down to the bridge to get the story of it being potentially destroyed, Clark Kent changes into Superman and follows them, you know, just in case he's needed. And needed he is! Luthor sets off his super sound wave computer thingy, and it starts sonically destroying the bridge. Lois, from hundreds of yards away, notices that there is a woman in a car on the bridge, and that she is in danger. You know, that's pretty fantastic. Sure, you can see a car on a bridge, but like, how can you tell who the driver is inside of it? Does Lois also have supervision? The plot thickens. But nonetheless, Superman goes to the bridge and stops it from swaying so the woman can be evacuated from it. Not only that, like while he's on the bridge there, Superman uses his super sensitive hearing to listen to the sound waves and pinpoint where it's coming from so he can uncover Lex Luthor's secret lair. To which he does! He busts into that joint and apprehends Lex Luthor. So, you know, that kind of sounds like the end of this 15-chapter serial. But unfortunately, nay. Because the crime spree in Metropolis has completely increased. But, like, how? Luthor was behind this string of heists before, but now he's in the state penitentiary. It's like, what gives? And this crime spree is getting weirder. Jimmy Olsen tried to stop one of these thugs as they were leaving a building, but the thug used a magic coin and disappeared into thin air. Also, a convicted thug named Lawson did that exact same trick with a coin and disappearing as he was being interviewed by Lois Lane on the street. Spirits, man, I tell you, spirits! And Clark Kent is concerned. And rightfully so. People disappearing? This kind of sounds like the application of some of Luthor's advanced science, but as we've established, he's in jail. In fact, the warden confirmed with Perry White that Luthor is there, and he's in solitary confinement for his own safety. But in confinement, Luthor uses a magic coin and he disappears into thin air as well. What is going on? Well, it turns out that Lex Luthor built himself a transporter. Like a flat-out transporter from Star Trek before Star Trek happened. He got Scotty to beam him up out of the can and into his new secret lair. Man, I wonder if Gene Roddenberry got any inspiration from this episode. But also, Lex tells his buddies about his other transporter machine. The one he just used is good enough to transport one person at a time in a short distance. The other one he built is powerful enough to transport entire armies across the world and could potentially be used to spread Superman's atoms in outer space. Later, that thug named Lawson that disappeared earlier? Well, Lex Luthor got him to do a human fly trick where he climbs up the side of a skyscraper in a fancy three-piece suit. Because why not? You know, if you're being a distraction like that, you might as well look good. He climbs up to one of the higher up floors, steals a bunch of diamonds, and then transports out of there. Wait a second, why did you bother climbing up there? Why not just transport up on that floor and then transport out, you know? Like, what's the point of a transporter if you're not gonna use it fully? Also, on the street level, Jimmy Olsen was snooping around a suspicious-looking van where he got knocked out and kidnapped by Luthor's men as they take off to parts unknown. But it should be all good because Superman is chasing after them. Well, it was going really good and Superman was winning until the van exploded. Which, oh my god, like Jimmy was in there. Is he gonna be okay? Well, we'll just have to wait and find out next time in Chapter 2 of the story. But with that, that is the end of this Super Tale.
Yes! Oh man, like these old serials, man, they're just, so classic. Especially when it's a character like Superman, like holy crap! There's been so many different variations of Superman throughout the years, so to see him like way back in his first live appearances, so good. So this is the second Superman movie serial. And you know, for a lot of people, and yeah, I do gotta say for myself, the first one was indeed the superior of the two. In comparison, the first one was much more grounded. It had a really awesome story. Even the main villain in it was really awesome. The crime queen of the underworld, the Spider Lady. Like, man, like, she was awesome in that. But with all of that, the thing that makes this serial so frickin' fantastic is that it has Lex Luthor in it. Lex frickin' Luthor! So it's awesome, you know, because not only is Lex Luthor the absolute arch nemesis of Superman, but at this time period of the film industry, when it came to superhero movies and stuff, it was incredibly rare, if not non-existent, to actually show a villain from the comic books in your film production. So the Spider Lady, as fantastic as she was in that serial, she did not exist in the comics. She was a character that they just created for that serial. Heck, you know, like the comics themselves in the Golden Age, there really wasn't a lot of supervillains for these superheroes to go up against. At least not initially, you know, they slowly kind of crept in. So to see Lex Luthor as the main villain in this production, fantastic! But even with that, you know, like, I kind of have two minds on this movie serial. For one, like, the technology and stuff is, like, a bit much. Like we've seen in this chapter, Lex built a transporter. He's also built some other fantastic things, you know, later on, but it's like, it just seems a bit too far-fetched. But at the same time, it's Lex Luthor we're talking about. This guy is a genius, you know? If he puts his mind to something, he can build it. Especially when we're talking the golden age of comics, like there were a lot of stories about a mad scientist building some, you know, over-the-top contraption. So in that sense, like, you know, all this stuff does fit. But still, you know, even with all of that, at the end of the day, I absolutely love it. So if you haven't seen it before, I strongly suggest you do, you know? But with that, we do have some more behind-the-scenes kind of things, you know, with Superman, with Lex Luthor, and all that kind of stuff going on over here.
So yes indeed, hey, Lex Luthor! Let us take a quick look into how this character came to be. So, you had Superman debut in Action Comics #1 in 1938, And, like I've said, when he was battling bad guys, they weren't exactly super villains. He went up against a bunch of crooks, gangsters, embezzlers, fraudsters, you know, whatever, right? Just some random Joe bad guys, which is always good to fight against, but they were always villains in a one-and-done story. So in 1939, the character, the Ultra Humanite, was created, and he was the first reoccurring villain that Superman went up against. This guy was a super genius, as they were building the conflict of brains versus brawn. Even though, you know, Superman is actually pretty smart, not just strong. So, as you always gotta do, you have to create more villains. And the next villain was Lex Luthor. And he first appeared in Action Comics number 23 in 1940. And, you know, like, if Ultra Humanite was a super genius, Lex Luthor was a super duper genius. Not only does he have genius level intellect, he also uses that intellect to become a criminal mastermind, him being an expert strategist and tactician, and even more deadly, he is an exceptionally gifted engineer and scientist. Which is a pretty fantastic villain to go up against Superman, you know, a character that can fight against anything. But man, the things Lex Luthor can do, hey? Like, jeez! Even in his first appearance, he was hanging out in a flying city that he built. Holy crap, hey? So, which is why, if you're watching the featured movie serial, Luthor building all these fantastic devices like a transporter and whatnot is really not far off from what happened in the comics. So the serial and the comics do line up with Luthor. One of the features about Lex Luthor, as we all know, is his beautiful head of red hair. Just luscious and luxurious. Well, it was until in the Superman comic strips, artist Leo Nowak accidentally drew Lex Luthor as a bald man, which is somewhat accredited to him accidentally picking the wrong character to draw from the comic books, because there were other bald guys running around, but eventually, you know, like the good people at DC Comics figured, yeah, you know what, he looks pretty good bald. Let's just run with that. So after that, Luthor's next appearance in the comic books was in Superman number 10 in 1941, which was also drawn by Leo Nowak. Not only did he draw Luthor as being bald, but also a bit more heavy set, which further went into the contrast of Superman and Luthor, you know, Superman being in complete physical shape, and Luthor being a physical shape, you know? But, you know, for Lex Luthor, that's pretty much the basics of the character up to the point of this movie's serial. There is so much more stuff that happens with Lex Luthor after this point, but we will get to those when we get to those. But for some other things that happened in this movie serial chapter 1, let's talk a little bit about that. So Luthor in this serial is portrayed by the seasoned thespian, Lyle Talbot. And portrayed like fantastically well. This guy, you know, being the first Luthor, was a freaking fantastic Luthor. Part of that is that Lyle Talbot is no stranger to the superhero genre in film. Even with these movie serials being in the early infancy of the superhero genre in film, Talbot was in the 1949 serial Batman and Robin, where he portrayed Commissioner Jim Gordon. 2 classic characters in 2 years. Fantastic work, Mr. Talbot. Also, gotta say, you know, with the footage of the Metropolis River Bridge being destroyed by Lex Luthor and his sound vibration machine, the footage there was in fact news footage of a real-life bridge disaster. That being the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, which was in Washington State. It was a suspension bridge that was being built starting in 1938, modeled after the Golden Gate Bridge. So it is a little odd because the designers and the engineers did account for the higher winds in that area, and they did design the bridge to have some sway and a little bit of movement to kind of deal with these strong winds. But unfortunately, they found out soon enough that the winds were a lot stronger than they had anticipated, and in 1940, the winds completely flung the bridge apart as it collapsed into the river. Also, the car that was on the bridge, which was being depicted by that random woman driver who got stuck on the bridge in the serial, that car was in fact the real car that belonged to Leonard Coatsworth, who was the editor at the local Tacoma newspaper, the News Tribune. He was able to get out of his car and escape the bridge collapse on foot. With no help from Superman that time, hey? Jeez, he must have been busy. But that's pretty much all I have for this first chapter of this second serial. We can get to more things in it when we get to more things. But for now, with this, that, those, and the other things, I guess, that's that. Also, if you're interested, I created my own comic book channel, 215 Comics. And currently, I have created my own cartoon series, The Adventures of the Density. And recently started a radio series featuring my newest character, Elastomorph, with more titles to come. So if you want to check it out, I'll leave a link up top here to that channel, and some links at the end of the video. Yay! Right on, and there you go. So thanks for watching the video. I hope you liked it as much as I did making it. Also, feel free to check out the source material that I featured in this video. And if you want to leave a comment on anything you may have liked or things I might have missed in this, feel free to do so. Or anything else, just to say hi. That's cool too. And other than that, have a great day. Thanks.